Every NFL team has at least one theme park closer to their home stadium, some closer than others, and today we're going to be looking at every playoff team from this past NFL season and ranking those teams by their theme parks. Whichever park is closest to the team's stadium, that's the park they get. Let's go. Number 14, Philadelphia Eagles, Storybook Land. This is a pretty small park with only one coaster, being Bubbles the Coaster. This is undoubtedly a kids' park and it's based off of fairy tales. As far as the park goes, really not much to say here. The Eagles themselves did have a fairy tale type season. They pretty much steamrolled everybody during the regular season and in the first couple rounds of the playoffs, but unfortunately for Philly fans, they lost another championship, this time the Super Bowl, to the Kansas City Chiefs. Still a great season though. Number 13, Seattle Seahawks, Wild Waves. This park just seems sad from everything I've seen. The Pacific Northwest is not a good place for theme parks whatsoever, and Wild Waves is a great example of why. It seems like there's potential with a couple of somewhat major roller coasters, but from rides not being open often to operations to not very many people being in the dry park, it doesn't seem like a great experience. I've never been, but from all the accounts I've seen, I don't know if there's a whole lot of reasons I should go. Bottom line, there's a reason this ranks 13 out of 14. As for the Seattle Seahawks, they had a surprisingly good season led by comeback player of the year Geno Smith. He and the entire team shocked everyone by making it to the playoffs, even though they didn't win a playoff game, but it was still very impressive what they were able to do. And at least they can kind of bail out the stinker that is Wild Waves. Number 12, Jacksonville Jaguars, Fun Spot Orlando. Despite being pretty small, this looks like a very solid little park. They have a somewhat legit GCI with White Lightning, which appears to give some good airtime moments, and the family suspended coaster Freedom Flyer to complement White Lightning. Does it stack up to Disney, Universal, SeaWorld? Well, no, but it still looks like a very solid park. A place for sure that if you were doing a Florida coaster road trip, you would want to hit up for a couple hours. And White Lightning is certainly the best coaster we've talked about so far. From everything I've seen, the Fun Spot parks are also a great place to go at night. I haven't visited this park, but I don't think there's anything particularly wrong about it, it's just not as good as the parks that are on the list above it. As far as football goes, the Jags, like the Seahawks, surprised everyone with a 9-8 record, and got a playoff win after being down 27-0. It was incredible. Despite losing the following week to Kansas City, this season still has to be considered a success because of how much growth they showed. Number 11, Miami Dolphins, Legoland, Florida. They have 4 roller coasters, some flat rides, and dark rides, but this is really all about the Lego aspect. It's just something you don't get at other parks. Take their best family coaster, Dragon, for example. It has a detailed dark ride section at the beginning of the layout, and it is all made out of Legos. It's just so cool. I'm actually kind of excited to ride the Dragon one day because while the layout isn't actually too crazy, I think that dark ride section adds a lot to the ride. I mean, just look at this Dragon, tell me that's not awesome. In any case, because of Legoland's lack of thrill rides, I had to put it lower on the list. Because ultimately, I'm a fan of thrill rides, and while I can appreciate a park like Legoland, it's not going to stack up to the parks higher on this list. If the Dolphins had been able to keep their quarterbacks healthy, then they very well could have gone on a Super Bowl run because their team is so talented, but the injuries at that position really did catch up to them. And that's a shame too, because when he was healthy, Tua Tagovailoa did some awesome things. I mean, there was just no way Skylar Thompson was going to beat the Bills, and he didn't, even though it was very close. Number 10, Baltimore Ravens, Six Flags America. And this is arguably, my friends, the least valued Six Flags park. They just don't give anything to this place. On paper though, their coaster collection isn't that bad. I know they have a Vekoma SLC and a pretty terrible wooden coaster, but outside of that, it's not bad. Wild One is a classic, but by all accounts, it's still running pretty well and is better than the newer wooden coaster in the park. Admittedly though, their standout coaster is kind of a weird one with Superman Ride of Steel. The name is cool, but the layout is a little bit weird with those sections of straight track and huge never-ending helixes. That being said, it looks like a pretty solid Intamin Mega Coaster. And of course, the layout makes a lot more sense when you look at the coaster it was cloned from, Ride of Steel at Six Flags Darien Lake, and hey, we'll talk about that one a little bit later. This is far and away the best thing at this park, and I kinda wish Six Flags invested more into the place because it just doesn't get new investments. What about the Ravens football team? Well, I'm so glad you asked. They finished with a 10-7 record, but with Lamar Jackson's injury that ended his season, it was clear that with backup quarterback Tyler Huntley, they were going to need a miracle to advance in the playoffs, and while they came darn close to getting a miracle, ultimately they did not. Number 9, Kansas City Chiefs, Worlds of Fun. This seems like a perfect definition of a mid-tier Cedar Fair park. Good coasters at the top, but not too many new additions. Granted, they are getting Zambezi's in there, which I'm so excited for. Not necessarily in the sense that I think it's going to be the best coaster in the park. I don't think that at all, but I think it's just so cool that they are finally getting a somewhat major roller coaster investment. Does this mean that Cedar Fair will start adding coasters to some of their other lower parks? Or do they just feel bad for not adding anything for so long? I doubt that's the case, but bottom line here, it's a good thing that Zambezi Ziner is being added to Worlds of Fun. The park's tallest coaster is built by Morgan Mamba. This is a ride that seems to have a lot of potential, but I don't actually know how it rides. I've heard that while smooth, these hypercoasters by Morgan don't offer a lot of airtime sometimes. If you've ridden Mamba, I'd love to hear how it rides in the comment section below. As far as quality goes, the Chiefs football team was much better than the park that represents them. They rolled through pretty much everyone during the regular season, finishing with a 14-3 record with Patrick Mahomes winning his second MVP. Not only did he win MVP, but he also led his team to a Super Bowl title against the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, my question is, out of all the seasons in Chiefs history, was this the best one? Number 8, New York Giants, Luna Park. Luna Park is an interesting case because they are actually owned by roller coaster manufacturer Zamperla. This is both a good and a bad thing. Good because we get to see the best of Zamperla in this park, both in their flat rides and coasters. But bad because the best of Zamperla when it comes to coasters really isn't that great. From everything I've seen though, it seems like Zamperla runs this park pretty well, which is great to see. But even with Zamperla's rides dominating the lineup there's no doubt that the best coaster is the Cyclone. A classic coaster which has provided inspiration and been cloned countless times for other coasters. And from those who have been on it recently, it's running like a dream, which is so great to see. This is such an important coaster in the theme park industry, and I'm so glad Zamperla is keeping it up like they have. After a pretty horrid 2021, the 2022 Giants shocked everyone with a 9-7-1 record. They were such a great story with Brian Daboll winning Coach of the Year. And they even won a playoff game, even though the Eagles absolutely destroyed them in the divisional round, but still a good season for the G-Men. Number 7, Minnesota Vikings, Nickelodeon Universe. Now this is how you do an indoor theme park. This is a park that will not blow you away, at least from what I've seen, but it's a place I really want to get to one day. SpongeBob SquarePants Rock Bottom Plunge is the star of the park, but they've got some other good rides as well, and the whole place is so colorful. Especially when the sun is out, it just looks like such a happy place, which is really what you want a theme park to be. I gotta imagine this is also better than Valley Fair, which would make it the best park in Minnesota. While I would think Renegade is the best coaster in Minnesota, I think the overall quality and fun factor of Nickelodeon Universe is probably higher. And if you're going to build a giant mall with an indoor theme park, the best place to do it is in cold weather. That being said, cold weather didn't stop the Vikings from having a strangely successful season. Minnesota won 13 out of 17 games, but arguably the most impressive part and the scariest part for their fans is that they were 11-0 in the regular season in one-score games. Did this mean that they were frauds, or did it mean that they were battle-tested for the playoffs? Turns out they were frauds. With this sad excuse of a fourth down pass ending their season with no playoff wins. I guess it was a good season, Minnesota? I guess. Number 6, Buffalo Bills, Six Flags Darien Lake. And here we are, at long last, the original Ride of Steel shows its face. And when you see this one, you see that the straight sections make a little bit of sense because of the fact that they're going over water. Six Flags only recently reacquired this park, but I think if they wanted to make some investment, there is a lot of potential here. The park already has a pretty decent number 1 roller coaster with Ride of Steel, and then you also have some supporting rides like Tantrum. Seeing the park put GCI's Titan track on Predator is a step in the right direction. Does this mean that Darien Lake is going to get continued investments? Honestly, I have no idea. But as it stands currently, this is a solid park in the Six Flags chain. Darien Lake is solid, and the Bills were more than solid. The preseason Super Bowl favorites did finish with a 12-4 record. And Nyheim Hines' kick return for a touchdown versus the Patriots on the first play after what happened to Damar Hamlin has got to be one of the best plays in NFL history. But when you get smacked in the divisional round of the playoffs in your home stadium, it's tough. Tough to remember that you did do some good things during the regular season when that's the way you go out, but 27-10, yikes. Number 5, San Francisco 49ers, California's Great America. Considering the park and the stadium literally share a parking lot, this one was not difficult to figure out. This is the only park on the list that I've actually visited, so I can speak from experience here. Overall, CGA is very solid, and I'm very sad that it's closing soon. The front of the park by the entrance is beautiful. That is one of my favorite entrances of any park anywhere. The ride lineup isn't one of the best in the world, but it's very good. Railblazer is the best ride, and I don't think it's close. The ejector airtime you get on that thing is amazing. And the pacing is pretty ridiculous as well. Then you also have the wooden coaster Gold Striker, which I've heard is running a lot smoother recently, which is great to hear because last time I rode it, it was pretty rough. Even with the roughness though, I could still appreciate what this ride did well. The bits of airtime, the layout, the tunnels, it's still a good ride. And assuming it is running smoothly, I would expect this coaster to make a major leap up my list. The short but sweet, classic B&M invert flight deck also deserves mention. There's enough quality here that it definitely is a bummer that this park will close in the next decade or so, barring a change. So get your visits while you can and consider yourself lucky. The fans on the other side of the parking lot saw a great 49ers team in 2022. Once rookie quarterback Brock Purdy took over, the 49ers took off, finishing with a 13-4 record. It felt like this team had a lot of potential to win the Super Bowl, and they did make it to the NFC Championship game. They also had a defense that ranked tops in the National Football League. However, in the aforementioned NFC Championship game, they lost both of their quarterbacks to injury, and it's very difficult to win when that happens. So, as you might expect, they got absolutely destroyed down the stretch. Number 4, Dallas Cowboys, Six Flags Over Texas. The park and the stadium are located very close to each other, so this was another one that it was very easy to figure out. While it's kind of considered an upper mid-tier Six Flags park nowadays, it was the original Six Flags park, and Six Flags headquarters are located nearby. Whenever you go to a Six Flags park, you can trace it back to Six Flags Over Texas, which is pretty wild. They have a collection of good but not elite coasters. Admittedly though, at least from what I've seen, they've been outclassed by a fellow Six Flags park in the same state, Six Flags Fiesta Texas. I think it's more of a situation where Six Flags Over Texas is just inferior to Six Flags Fiesta Texas, even though Over Texas isn't necessarily doing anything wrong. Did I say Texas too much? Definitely a park I want to go to someday, and they also have the original RMC, which is kind of fitting that it was at the original Six Flags park. And for those who said this was the Cowboys' year, it kind of looked like it could have been, but ultimately, no, it was not. Give them credit, they did have a very good regular season, but come playoff time, they once again managed to embarrass themselves. Still not sure what on earth that was. Number 3, Los Angeles Chargers, Universal Studios Hollywood. I think this is a great example of a park that doesn't need roller coasters to be good. Granted, they do have 2 of them, but they are not the standouts of this park. This park recently received a brand new land with Super Nintendo World. Just from videos I've seen, the visuals from this land look like some of the best of any land in the world. Of course, this isn't surprising because Universal is very good at what they do in the theme park industry. But if anyone in SoCal forgot about this park, this should make them not forget about it again. You could say it doesn't nearly have the ride lineup of the other parks in Southern California, and I would agree with that statement, but the theming in this park certainly makes up for a lot of that. I can't wait to visit. The Chargers finished with a 10-7 record and had a solid regular season, and you would have thought that they would have won their first playoff game after being up 27-0, but oh yeah, they're the Chargers. What a disappointing end. Number 2, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Busch Gardens, Tampa. What I see as the best park in Florida for thrill coasters. The park has a deep lineup, featuring but not limited to one of the best inverted coasters in the world in Montu, one of the most praised launch coasters for families, Cheetah Hunt, a great looping coaster, Kumba, and the new RMC Iron Gwazi. Not to mention the flat rides, the theming, this park really does have it all. From someone who hasn't visited any of the SeaWorld parks, is this the best SeaWorld park in the United States? I think it's certainly possible. And it's very clear that this is indeed one of SeaWorld's favorites with the continued investment. But the question is, could the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2022 match the awesomeness of Busch Gardens Tampa? The answer is absolutely not. The Bucs were just a little off all year long, and if it wasn't for a solid defense and some Tom Brady comebacks that came out of nowhere, this team would have been horrible. The 31-14 playoff loss was just the cherry on top to an overall disappointing season. And coming in at number 1 is the Cincinnati Bengals with Kings Island. One of, if not the, favorite park of Cedar Fair. This place has gotten continued investment over the years, coaster after coaster after coaster, and now some may even go as far as to say that it's better than its sister park in Ohio, Cedar Point. The rides at Kings Island are incredible, but from what I've heard, so are the operations. Multiple trains, fast-moving lines, sign of a good park. The place undoubtedly had potential from when Cedar Fair bought the place from Paramount, but Paramount definitely didn't do everything right. And Kings Island's new ownership has done a world of good for it. Coasters like Mystic Timbers, Diamondback, and the new Wish Giga Coaster Orion are just a few examples on how Cedar Fair has shown love to this park. This is probably a top 5 bucket list park for me. It looks like such a cool place. And the Bengals were nearly on top of the NFL just as Kings Island was on top of this list. They proved that 2021 was no fluke and that they were a legit team. But some guy named Patrick Mahomes just had to end their season short of a Super Bowl. But 2 straight AFC Championship games is pretty darn good. And they're going to be a force to be reckoned with for sure. But no matter how good the Bengals were, the bottom line is that Kings Island is the best park on the list. And that, at long last, brings us to the end. If you like this style of video and want to see it for other sports, I'd love to hear about it in the comment section below. But otherwise, that's going to do it for now. I'll see you all next time.